Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're joined with Matt Mullins, who is the Managing Director of High Tech International. Matt, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on.
No problem. If we don't mind just starting with introducing yourself and what you guys do over at High Tech International.
Well, my name's Matt Mullins, and I'm the Director of High Tech Investigations International. We predominantly specialize in digital security services and products, and in particular, mobile phone services.
Interesting. The digital security side of things is just such a ever-growing topic at the moment. A lot of it is obviously quite uncharted territory, so you yourself are having to work out these things as you go along as tech comes. So I would be very interested to hear where you see the trends going and upcoming at the moment.
Yes, that's true. The digital landscape is evolving at an ever-increasing rate and has been doing so for the past number of years. And it's a bit of a catch-up game for most out there at the moment. Now, the industry that we work in, I could foresee a number of years ago that the likes of big tech enterprises, corporations would be transitioning across from traditional computer and networking systems onto their mobile devices and tablets. And that's where there were a substantial amount of vulnerabilities. And that's where we are at today. Now, there is a lot of technology that has come out, which is aiding the digital security industry. However, with the likes of AI and a substantial amount of cyber attacks taking place, and individuals' a lack of understanding on how these attacks take place, it is a bit of a messy sector at the moment. So whilst we're trying to educate people and have people integrate onto new systems, there will be hostile actors out there who will be attacking these individuals and their organizations while the transition period takes over.
Interesting. So you're saying the obviously device sort of security started with all computers and whatnot, and then they started to migrate onto the phones, and you've sort of capitalized on that. And the trend you're sort of seeing is AI and this sort of attack surface being around mobile devices rather than computers and whatnot and so on.
That's correct. Yes, that is. What would traditionally happen is from the likes of the private sector, enterprises, large corporate companies, all the way through to government departments, is traditionally they would operate on desktops, laptops, etc. And that's where the vast majority of the cybersecurity industry aimed their services and products at. However, we could foresee everything moving onto the likes of mobile phones and tablets. And that's why it was a very niche market that I moved into at the time. There were very few people to assist and help along my journey. There were some people who were quite reluctant to help as well. However, we overcame that. And our business is in a really good position at the moment. And we're being approached by multiple international and global clients because there is a major shortage within the cybersecurity industry, specifically to do with mobile phone technologies. Now, what you would have is your cybersecurity experts from the past, or organizations, suppliers that were predominantly aiming their services towards the likes of computer networking systems, and these are not adaptable to mobile phone technologies. Now, as much as they try and hold on to the market, we are also trying to educate them and educate the likes of big tech enterprises, corporations, and the private sector that there is a vast difference between the security structure and what needs to be implemented on mobile phone technologies and tablets, etc., as opposed to computers and networking systems. So there's a bit of a tug of war going on at the moment, and understandably so. Certain elements do not want to let go of the power and the stranglehold they've had for the past few decades. However, education is key to this, and we are slowly getting the message across, and hence the reason that we've achieved such great reach and attention from international companies. And we are really busy at the moment, and we cannot complain about where we are.
Yeah, you sort of touched on a point, which I was going to ask you next about who your target market is, because I know you've done some good marketing online, and you're sort of inundated with like your everyday consumer as well as your corporations, as well as that sort of the high net worth sort of industry. It's hard to service everyone. So where are you at the moment with who your target market is?
Well, initially starting from the grassroots levels, we had to start off at the lower end, and that was with the private sector. However, we became inundated very quickly with the demand for our services and products. And instead of being busy fools and servicing everyone for minimal fees, we decided to move up the ladder a bit. It's been quite a fight getting up the ladder, but we've achieved remarkable success over the past 12 months in particular. And now we've got, as I state, international recognition, and myself and a couple of my colleagues are working with much larger corporate enterprise level clients, as well as government officials. Governments from multiple countries across the world now are showing a lot of interest in our products and services, which is brilliant for us. Now, these are much bigger projects that we'll be working on. However, it does cut out the private sector quite a lot. And as we're a really small organization, we cannot cater to everybody. So our aim now is to solely move into the enterprise corporate sector of the industry.
And as you say, you have to pick your customers right, which you obviously are doing that in the right direction at the moment. I want to
That's correct. Yes.
pick up something you said earlier, and it's the dreaded two-letter word that everyone talks about at the moment, and that's AI. You mentioned that the new trends is obviously AI trying to get into our devices. Where do you sit at the moment with how you're harnessing it? Are you strictly defending it, or are you harnessing it to help with like offensive security aspects?
So where we stand, we implement AI in much of our investigations and in order to streamline a lot of our business runnings. However, when it comes to digital security, we have to be extremely careful on what AI technology, softwares, tools, etc. we use or implement within our systems, because as far as I'm sure we're all aware, AI is a massive data collection tool that collects substantial amounts of data. Now, if we're trying to set up secure and privacy-orientated systems, implementing AI can be extremely dangerous. Therefore, a substantial amount of research needs to go into what potential tools we can and cannot use. And the vast majority of them we just will not use. However, we use them in other aspects of our business to streamline our business. Therefore, we can afford to get away without having a lot of members of staff and a lot of people on board. We keep to a very close, tight-knit network of like-minded individuals who share information between each other in order to better our skill set within the sector. And we are aware of what tools we can potentially use that are AI-orientated and what tools not to use. There are some secure tools out there that are very minimal when it comes to data collection, and the vast majority, however, are very data collection orientated. So those we avoid at all costs. However, we'll implement those in other aspects of our business. So it has its ups and it has its downs. I know there are a lot of people out there who are under the assumption that AI is no good to anyone. And AI is going to come and take everyone's jobs, etc. That's the mentality of a lot of people, and that's the mentality of individuals who actually don't understand the technology. I don't think AI will take your jobs. I think the individual who uses AI will take your job, and that's the understanding to have behind it.
Yeah, it's interesting to obviously hear everyone's perspective on AI, and I sort of knew as soon as I asked that it was your aspect would be about digital security in terms of like data mining and whatnot. So everyone has a different angle on it. You
It
also
all depends on
mentioned,
how you use it. It does have its benefits. It has great benefits.
well,
However,
yeah,
one needs to be cautious on how it's used and understand what systems are running in the background, what data is being collected in the background, what organization is behind the actual setup as well. So a substantial amount of research does need to go into it. And a lot of people just do not do their research on these products and services.
yeah. Would you say over the past 12 months, your biggest constraint? I know you mentioned it is the growth aspect and keeping up with it. Would you say that's the biggest constraint you've been dealing with, or is there any sort of um, new sort of threat that's really caused issue?
Growth and demand, we were struggling with for a substantial amount of time. Now, understanding coming from the bottom with absolutely no assistance whatsoever from anyone in the sector or elsewhere was very difficult. So we fought our way through that. And the best way to learn something is to learn it on your own and get no assistance along the way, which is what I did myself. And fortunately, I've got a decent team around myself now and a decent bunch of security researchers who have a lot of input into the various products and services that us as a company supply. That has taken away a lot of manpower and time. Once we incorporate AI systems into that, it streamlines everything for us. Therefore, we do not have to have a large team with us to achieve the heights that we've actually achieved at the moment. And we'll continue to do so going forward. We'll continue to implement the AI tools, etc., going forward, but in the right places. Time has always been a constraint, and it always will be. However, that's why it's crucial for us to select the right clientele that we will work with.
Do you think that enough talent managers are keeping up with the tech threats as we increase, or do you think that the device management and the online security aspect is something that's overlooked and it's sort of a compound and growing problem?
It's completely overlooked, and there's a lot of negligence and a lot of misunderstanding. Now, no one really understands how much they can be affected by this until they are affected by it. And once they're affected by it, they come running to us. And unfortunately, at that stage, it's too late for us to assist. The job will be too big for us to take on. The idea is actually to jump on board, to educate yourselves and understand the threat landscape that lies ahead and how dangerous it is in the current climate to not have digital security on your mobile devices and your other electronic and digital devices that you have around you, particularly if you're someone who is in the public eye, that being VIP CEOs, large corporations, enterprises, talents, like you say, influencers, etc. Now, it's absolutely crucial that they jump on board with this. However, there's the stigma about jumping on board with new technologies. I do understand why people think the way they do, and that's because they are under the assumption, and they have been misled in the past by various powers above, and their assumption is that everything that's been shown towards them or that they're being told may not entirely be true. However, when it comes to your digital security, it's extremely important to jump on board with this. The last thing you would want is for your personal data, sensitive data, intimate data, to be available to the wrong person, as you can be held hostage. You could be held to a ransomware attack with this data. So I would suggest that anyone who's listening to this, who is in that sector as such, should definitely explore having a digital security expert on board with them in order to protect them, their assets, and their clients.
Yes, it's a tricky one. Issue I sometimes run into because it's dealing with sensitive stuff and it's sort of a preemptive measure, your service. So you need to build a bit of trust with someone so they know it's worthwhile. Because the only time
Correct.
the pain point's high enough for them to come to you is, as you say, it's too late. So it's a hard sell sometimes. I think you mentioned initially part of the whole process is actually educating people on what it is because people don't really actually even
Correct. That
couldn't
is
understand.
the hardest part of it, educating individuals so that they can actually understand how dangerous it is not to protect your data and your digital assets. There is a lot of reluctance by individuals out there to learn. Humans' natural instinct is to be lazy and not to learn. We do not like change as human beings. The vast majority, at least, don't like to change. However, in times like this, with technology moving forward as quickly as it is, it's imperative, if you intend to stay on the top of your market space, that you jump on board with a digital security expert and receive adequate advice as to where to go. Because if you do not jump on board sooner rather than later, then you will be left behind.
So we've gone over quite a few things here, Matt, and you have your finger on the pulse of a lot of things. Your time, money, and resources are headed in the right direction. Also mentioned quite a lot of the constraints that you've had and issues that you're upcoming. What does the next 12 months look like if you had to have a step-by-step plan of where you're headed?
Complicated. Very complicated. That's trying to weed out the potentially irrelevant workload that's coming in, or should I say minimal workload that's coming in from certain lower aspects of society, and concentrating our attention on the higher net worth individuals, CEOs, corporations, government organizations, and the likes, who have a number of bigger projects lined up and have approached us and asked if we can potentially assist with our knowledge, with our expertise and skill set. So I wish I had a lot more time on my hands so I could take a lot more on. However, with these vast projects, they do take a substantial amount of time and planning in order to incorporate various protocols and security structures in order to implement them correctly. Hence the reason I initially mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that I would be moving away from the private sector as much as possible. And that is solely because as the business grows, we need to understand where our future lies, and our future lies with bigger organizations.
Yeah, it seems to be a reoccurring theme for you if you're just sort of overwhelmed with the unimportant stuff as you go along.
That,
Yeah, it's incredibly hard what you do because, as I say, it's such a complicated. Like I feel like I have good knowledge, and even I get a bit overwhelmed with like the digital device security things. And you have to take such a complicated thing and whistle it down so someone with no technical knowledge can understand it. I think you're
correct.
doing well at it, but it's an ever
That is the
growing.
most difficult part of all.
Yeah,
So, having to break it down. Now, what I found myself is that a lot of people in the industry that I work in, will complicate things and will explain things in a very complicated manner and use a lot of tech jargon that confuses individuals. And that's often used in order to sell a product.
yeah.
And in order to put the fear up individuals and have them buy into their specific products. But I found our success is built on breaking things down and explaining in very simple terms how they can defend their own digital security and data and how we can assist them with this without using all these technical terms and without complicating things. So that's what we try and do. And believe it or not, it's not just the private sector who don't understand. We work with a lot of larger corporations, enterprises, and their security standards are absolutely appalling. And they've had a number of high-end cybersecurity experts and corporations dealing with them for the past number of years, and they have implemented absolutely zero mobile phone security systems within their organizations, despite the fact that the vast majority of them have migrated across to using mobile phones and tablets. And what they quite often try and do is implement compute and networking security protocol and tools onto mobile phones, which does not work. We're talking about completely different operating systems, completely different networking systems. However, when they use special or complicated tech jargon that confuses the client buys into this. And as I've been with the client for a substantial amount of time, the client has trust in them. However, when we come along, we open up a can of worms and we explain how things should be done properly when moving across to mobile phones, tablets, etc. And it is a completely different space altogether. And this is what people need to understand. So we're not there to completely get rid of cybersecurity experts who work in computer and networking sectors, because they have a massive part to play still. However, their fear is losing their client base. And there is plenty of room with technology expanding and progressing as quickly as it is. There is a lot of room for both parties to come to the table and get on pretty well. However, understandably so, certain elements do not want to let go what they've had control of for a substantial amount of time. So it has been a bit of an uphill battle, but we are winning the battle and we will get there in the end.
Yeah, little by little. And I think you sort of personified that well, where there's a fine line between obviously not scaremongering to get the business in, but at the same time, like you do need to state the logical facts of like what the problems are. So there's a fine
Correct.
line, and I think you're treading across it carefully, and you're doing a really good job. And if this podcast is any sort of evidence of that, I think you've done quite well at personifying exactly what the issue is and how we
Thank
go
you.
about it. And yeah, man, I feel like you really hit the nail on the head with finding the new gap in the market. And it's not to overtake anyone, it's not to get rid of anyone. It's just a fact that there's new things evolving, and your
Correct.
service takes on that new thing. And
Correct.
I
That's totally correct.
yeah, sorry, I won't keep you any longer, but I know you're a very very busy guy, and I really appreciate you coming on. So just to
Appreciate it.
air it off, anyone wants to get hold of you, touch base with Matt Mullins and High Tech International, where would they go?
They can visit us on our website, which is hightechinvestigations.com. That's spelled HITECH investigations.com. We're also on a number of social media platforms, so you can search us under the same user tag, High Tech Investigations. So our details, like I state, contact details are on our website. You can view us there, get in touch with us there. If you've got any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. Bear in mind, we are inundated with traffic coming in, requests coming in. So if we do not get back to you immediately, we will get back to you at our soonest convenience.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having me on today, Aaron.